Hello, my name is Lisa Shea, and this video is part of my series on horror authors, horror stories, horror novels, and all things horror. So today we're going to talk about Crow Girl by Tabitha Potts, which is part of the collection The Abyss Within, which has 13 short stories that are horror themed in general. Tabitha Potts has two different stories in this collection, and she has a great website, which is at tabithapotts.com, where she talks about her history. She has an MA in creative writing, and she's published many of her short stories in various different anthologies. So if you want to find her stories, it doesn't look like I couldn't find that she has any books of her own out right now, which hopefully she will at some point soon. But right now you'll have to sort of hunt and try to track down where she has her stories in these different anthologies. Or you can start with The Abyss Within, which is the one that we are talking about here, to read the ones that she has in here, which are very, very nice. So we're talking about The Crow Girl. And again, I don't give out any spoilers. This one's a reasonably long one so that I can talk somewhat about it without giving away the entire storyline. But it's a gently written story, so there isn't any explicit gore or entrails or things like that, which I personally tend to, I guess resist is the word. It's more a psychological horror story, and more than that, it's more of a dark fantasy story. So it's got a really powerful dark feeling throughout it, with also some fantastical elements in it. And I really love that environment. You know, it gets to be a tricky question. When is something a dark fantasy? When does it slide over into horror? And there is something awful that happens to one of the characters, but I would almost say that this is more of a dark fantasy, which to me is a good thing. It really is a wonderful story to read and wonderful characters that are built up in this environment. The world that this Crow Girl is in very strongly resonates with a rural English village to me, and that's part of why I enjoy it so much, because it brings that kind of fairy tale fantasy element to it. So the foundling brats rescued from hedgerows. We don't really call them hedgerows in the U.S. We just call them hedges. And she's in a little village, and she goes to a neighboring village for a fair. Those just aren't things that we have in the U.S. We have towns and cities, and we tend to have, you know, summer festivals or stuff like that. But this whole going from village to village, going for a fair, going to pick up lace and ribbons, all of that gives this wonderful English rural feel to it. And she meets a peddler at the fair, which again is something we don't really have in the U.S. We have, I don't know, vendors at festivals, but they aren't peddlers in the sense that you have in England, where historically they would go around from village to village selling things. You know, we had different things in colonial America, but we're not going to go into the history of peddlers versus traveling salesmen. The overall idea is that I really love the environment of the Crow Girl and the sense of villages with small town peddlers going around selling ribbons and lace and things like that. So this foundling child is rescued from the hedgerows, and she could make noise. She was screeching, but the people who adopted her would try to talk to her, and she could only just see their mouths opening and closing. She could not hear them. And later on, there's people hammering pots and pans, and she can't hear them either. So she is a deaf person, and she probably could have learned to talk, because it seems that she can make noises, but because of the way her adopted parents raised her, she never learns to talk, and they end up just beating her instead of actually taking care of her. So she had a fairly rough childhood, but she perseveres and grows, and the story that the journey that she goes on is a very satisfying one. It's a lot of fun to read. You know, parts of it are rough, so I don't mean fun in a happy fairies and pixie dust kind of way. I mean it's a enjoyable tale of a person persevering and overcoming obstacles and those sorts of things. And I enjoy the dark fantasy aspects of it. I enjoy the atmosphere, the brooding atmosphere with crows that Tabitha creates in her storyline, and just everything from start to finish. This is definitely one of the stories where I would think about making a second video which has spoilers in it, so that you can watch the first one just to get a sense that you really should get your hands on the story and read it. And then afterwards you could watch the other one to hear my thoughts on what I enjoyed so much about this one. But I love the way that the characters are described, and how you've got a narrator who doesn't really understand what's going on around her. She has trouble understanding the details of how the humans are working. She feels much more comfortable in the forest with the birds, and when things happen to her, she can misinterpret them or not quite understand them well because of the way that she is. So I enjoy that type of narrator where you're not quite sure what the world is going on, but you also can understand some things that she doesn't understand because you actually know what's happening with. I won't give away the details, but in general, the environment is wonderful. The way that these scenes are described are wonderful, and this is easily, probably something set in the 1600s or 1500s, a nice rural kind of atmosphere, and a classic fairy tale, dark fantasy fairy tale kind of setup. So I enjoyed the story immensely. I recommend that you take a look and read it. It was very well written. It drew me right in and made me care about the character and wanted to follow through to the end, and I was very satisfied with the ending of the story. So the story is called Crow Girl. The author is Tabitha Potts. Definitely take a look out for her other things. And again, I hope that she does start putting together compilations of books in her own name so that we can easily find her and read her different offerings that she's got. And then in this one in particular is In the Abyss Within, 13 Chilling Tales to Keep You Up at Night, published by Smash Bear Publishing. So take a look for that one and let me know your thoughts on the story. If there's other stories or books that I should take a look at, please let me know that as well, because I'd love to get some recommendations. So thank you very much and have a great afternoon.